Dismissing the vanishing stars as sensor glitches from a primitive world, the Galactic Council had previously called us paranoid and laughed when our astrophysicists presented the data. Yet because humanity has always looked into the dark and expected monsters, they finally stopped laughing and started begging the moment the Orion arm went black. It began in the quiet hum of a basement laboratory at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. Dr. Cedric Pendleton, a senior astrophysicist whose career had spanned the golden age of humanity's expansion into the cosmos, was staring at a discrepancy that defied every known law of physics. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for barely a decade. We were the newcomers, the upstarts from a high-gravity death world who had brute-forced our way into faster-than-light travel using crude fission drives and sheer stubbornness. The Council, a bureaucratic alliance of dozens of ancient, elegant alien species, treated Earth as little more than a violent, hyperactive child. They gave us a seat at the table, mostly to keep an eye on us, and shared just enough technology to keep us pacified. But Earth had never fully trusted the stars, while the rest of the galaxy relied on the ancient, pre-existing sensor networks maintained by the Council. Humanity had quietly built its own. The project was classified Project Argus. It was a joint venture utilizing deep space listening arrays developed by Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works and heavily funded by DARPA, placed meticulously along the outer edge of the Oort cloud. Cedric's screen displayed a map of the Perseus arm, a neighboring spiral arm of our galaxy, or at least it was supposed to. "Recalibrate the telemetry," Cedric muttered into his headset, rubbing his tired eyes. "Check the Lockheed arrays in Sector 4. I'm getting dead space where Delta 9 should be." "Doctor," his assistant, a sharp young data analyst named Chloe, replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I've run the diagnostics 3 times. It's not a glitch. The star at Delta 9, it's gone. Not went supernova. Not collapsed into a dwarf. Its entire infrared and ultraviolet signature simply winked out. And it's not just Delta 9. Look at the neighboring clusters." Cedric leaned closer, his blood running cold. Over the span of the last 6 months, 7 main sequence stars had disappeared. They hadn't burned out. They had been snuffed out. By tracking the chronological order of the disappearances, Cedric realized with a sickening drop in his stomach that whatever was doing this was moving. And it was moving fast, charting a direct course toward the inner core of the galaxy, toward Council space. 3 days later, the data was sealed, highly classified, and couriered to Earth's most formidable diplomat, Ambassador Thomas Whitmore. Whitmore was a veteran negotiator who had cut his teeth on the United Nations Security Council before being chosen to represent humanity in the grand halls of the Galactic Assembly on Primea. Whitmore stood in the center of the assembly chamber, a massive amphitheater built of crystalline structures and polished obsidian, designed to make any single being feel insignificant. Surrounding him were the towering Valerians, the avian Krell, and the cybernetic Sindis. "Counselors," Whitmore projected his voice, utilizing the acoustic dampeners to ensure every translator caught his urgency. "Earth's independent telemetry arrays have detected a massive anomaly approaching from the Perseus arm. We are tracking a total localized entropy event. Entire star systems are going dark. We believe this is an apex threat, a swarm, or an artificial construct of unimaginable scale, consuming stellar bodies. We must mobilize the Grand Fleet and establish a quarantine line at the Epsilon choke point." Silence hung in the chamber for a long moment. Then, High Counselor Xylar of the Valerians leaned forward. He was a tall, luminescent being whose species had not known war for 10 millennia. He let out a noise that, translated, was a scoff of utter derision. "Ambassador Whitmore," Xylar's voice echoed with condescension. "Your species has barely mastered rudimentary quantum mechanics, yet you presume to instruct the Council on galactic astrophysics. The Perseus arm is prone to dense nebula storms and dark matter fluctuations. Your Argus arrays, which we warned you were built with obsolete human engineering, are simply experiencing localized interference." "Counselor," Whitmore interrupted, slamming a hand onto his podium. "We have cross-referenced this with independent data from SpaceX-designed deep-range probes. This is not interference. The stars are gone. Trillions of lives in those outer rim colonies have already been erased. You are ignoring a predator because you refuse to believe you can be prey." Laughter rippled through the gallery. It wasn't booming, but a polite, mocking chittering from hundreds of delegates. "Human paranoia is well documented," a Krell delegate chimed in. "You see threats in every shadow. The Council will not disrupt interstellar trade or mobilize a military force because an Earthling telescope needs its lenses cleaned." Whitmore looked around the room. He saw arrogance. He saw complacency. The aliens had been at the top of the food chain for so long they had forgotten what it meant to survive in the dirt. "I see," Whitmore said quietly, gathering his datapads. The room fell silent at the sudden shift in his tone. The desperate diplomat was gone. In his place was the cold, calculating human. "We presented this data as an ally. We offered you the chance to prepare. Let the record show that Earth fulfilled its diplomatic obligations." Whitmore turned his back on the High Counselor, an egregious breach of galactic etiquette, and walked out. Within hours of Whitmore's return to Earth, a closed-door meeting convened at the Pentagon. The President of the United States, alongside military leaders from the European Union, the Asian Coalition, and private aerospace titans, sat in absolute silence as Cedric Pendleton presented the latest Argus readings. The anomaly was accelerating. "We have exactly 3 years before it reaches the outer colonies of the Orion Arm," Cedric concluded, packing away his laser pointer, "and 5 years before it hits Earth." General David Brooks, the newly appointed commander of the Earth Defense Coalition, stood up. "The Council won't help us, so we do what we do best. We dig trenches, we build walls, and we make guns big enough to kill God." The Cassandra Protocol was initiated. Humanity officially withdrew all structural resource contributions from the Galactic Council, claiming an internal economic crisis. The aliens sneered, writing humanity off as isolationist cowards, unable to handle the pressures of galactic society. They had no idea. Over the next 3 years, Earth transformed into a war machine. Private sector giants like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Boeing were completely nationalized and merged with DARPA black projects. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was gutted, hollowed out by automated mining drones to feed the orbital foundries. Humanity stopped building exploration vessels and started building dreadnoughts, massive brutalist wedges of titanium and depleted uranium, powered by experimental antimatter cores the Council had expressly forbidden. We didn't know exactly what was coming in the dark. But humanity was determined to make sure whatever it was choked on us. 3 years and 2 months after Whitmore's dismissed warning, the laughter finally died. It happened during the standard galactic twilight cycle, the Valerian Prime colony on Epsilon Eridani, a jewel of biological engineering, home to 4 billion souls and a hub of interstellar art and culture, was transmitting its daily trade logs to the Citadel. In the middle of a transmission, the feed stuttered. At the Galactic Assembly, High Counselor Xylar was interrupted by a frantic communications officer. A holographic display was thrown into the center of the chamber. It was a live feed from the Epsilon Eridani Orbital Defense Station. The image was a nightmare of static and chaos. The station was shaking violently. Outside its viewport, the system's radiant yellow sun was bleeding. Massive tendril-like structures of absolute darkness were wrapped around the star, siphoning its plasma. The light of the system was visibly dimming. "High Counselor!" the station commander screamed, his normally serene Valerian face contorted in raw terror. "They came out of nowhere. No warp signatures, no energy spikes. It's a swarm, millions of them. They are ripping the atmosphere off the colony." The feed cut to black. The telemetry data from the system flatlined. 4 billion lives, gone in less than 20 minutes. The star itself had been extinguished, leaving behind a cold, dead husk of a system. Panic erupted in the Galactic Assembly. The sheer impossibility of the event shattered thousands of years of intellectual superiority. The Krell delegates demanded a military response, but their fleet admirals reported that whatever had attacked Epsilon Eridani possessed shielding that rendered their plasma weapons entirely useless. The Sindis offered mathematical models that predicted the swarm's trajectory. The results caused several delegates to faint. The swarm was heading directly down the Orion Arm, straight through the heart of Council space. "Who has defenses in that sector?" Xylar demanded, his bioluminescence flickering wildly in fear. "Where is the Grand Fleet?" "The Grand Fleet is scattered, Counselor," a frantic aide replied. But the trajectory. It places the swarm on a direct collision course with the Sol system in 30 cycles. Earth. Xylar froze. Earth. The primitive dirt ball they had laughed out of the room 3 years ago. The humans who had claimed they saw this coming. "Contact them," Xylar ordered, his voice trembling. "Contact Ambassador Whitmore immediately." It took 2 days for Earth to accept the transmission. When they finally did, the council chamber held its collective breath. The holographic projector flickered to life, expecting to see a terrified, begging human leadership seeking refuge behind the council's inner core shields. Instead, Ambassador Whitmore appeared. He wasn't in a diplomatic suite. He was standing on the command deck of a ship that defied everything the Council thought they knew about human engineering. The room behind him was vast, illuminated by the tactical red glow of combat lighting. Outside the viewport behind Whitmore, the Council delegates could see a fleet. It wasn't a fleet of ragtag exploratory vessels. It was a terrifying armada. Thousands of angular, heavily armored warships blotted out the stars. They were surrounding a colossal structure, a Dyson ring under construction around Earth's sun, bristling with macro cannons the size of skyscrapers. "Ambassador Whitmore," Xylar stammered, attempting to maintain his dignity. "Earth. Sol system is in grave danger. A localized entropy swarm has destroyed Epsilon Eridani. The Council has determined it is headed toward your space. We are prepared to offer evacuation protocols for a limited number of your planetary leadership." Whitmore's face was carved from granite. He looked at Xylar not as an inferior, but as a general looks at a civilian. "We know what happened to Epsilon Eridani, Counselor," Whitmore said coldly. "We've been tracking the swarm since they crossed the Perseus threshold. We watched them eat your colony. It's a tragedy that could have been avoided if you had listened to our data 3 years ago." How are you projecting that much mass?" a Sindis delegate gasped, analyzing the sensor readings of the human fleet. "That alloy composition, it's restricted. Antimatter weaponry is a violation of the Treaty of Primea." "The Treaty of Primea is null and void," Whitmore shot back. "You laughed when we warned you. You called us primitives. So we embraced our primitive nature. While you debated philosophy and traded art, humanity mobilized every man, woman, and factory on our planet. We tore apart our own asteroid belt to build the Sol Aegis fleet. "Ambassador, you cannot fight this," Xylar pleaded, the reality of the situation crashing down on him. "Their shields absorb all known plasma and energy frequencies. Your kinetic weapons will be useless. You must evacuate." Whitmore leaned closer to the terminal, a grim, predatory smile touching the corner of his lips. "You see, Counselor, that's the difference between you and us," Whitmore said, his voice echoing through the stunned alien assembly. "You rely on energy, on elegance, on plasma that can be absorbed. Humanity relies on Sir Isaac Newton. We don't shoot plasma. We shoot 2-ton slugs of depleted uranium wrapped in tungsten, accelerated to 0.2% the speed of light." Whitmore tapped a command on his console. The feed shifted, showing the edge of the Sol system, out past Pluto. A massive sensor net, an evolution of Project Argus, flared to life on the Council's screens. Thousands of red blips were materializing at the edge of the system. The swarm had arrived. "They've come to eat our sun," Whitmore whispered, the red light of the command deck reflecting in his eyes. "We're going to feed them something else. Watch and learn, Council." The transmission didn't cut out. Whitmore left the feed open. He wanted the galaxy to see exactly what happened when you backed humanity into a corner. The battle for the Sol system was about to begin. The holographic tactical map on the bridge of the UNS Washington glowed a menacing crimson. General David Brooks stood at the center of the command deck, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes locked on the expanding cloud of hostile contacts crossing the Oort cloud threshold. The feed to the Galactic Council remained open on a secondary display, a deliberate choice by Earth's high command. The aliens were going to witness every brutal second. "General," Captain Robert Miller's voice cut through the tense silence of the bridge. "Argus telemetry confirms 3 million distinct entities. They are maintaining a tetrahedral formation. Velocity is constant. They are ignoring the outer gas giants and plotting a direct burn for Sol." "Shield status?" Brooks asked, his voice calm, projecting an iron certainty he hoped his crew felt. "Aegis array is at maximum yield. Northrop Grumman confirms the planetary defense grids over Earth, Mars, and the Jovian colonies are synchronized. We are ready." On the Council feed, High Counselor Xylar and the assembled alien delegates watched in a state of paralyzed dread. The sheer volume of the swarm was unfathomable. The Valerian homeworld had fallen to a fraction of this number. "They are within engagement range of the outer defense perimeter," Miller reported. "The swarm is charging their absorption fields. Our sensors are detecting a massive spike in dark energy. It's exactly what they used to consume the Epsilon Eridani fleet's plasma salvos." "Let them charge," Brooks said grimly. "They think we're going to fight with light. We're going to hit them with rocks. Order the first fleet to lock firing solutions. Magnetic accelerators only. No energy weapons." The swarm moved closer, a tidal wave of geometric shadows that seemed to drink the ambient light of the stars. They were biomechanical nightmares, ancient and silent, designed to consume entire solar systems to fuel their endless migration. Fire. Across the vast emptiness of the outer solar system, 500 human dreadnoughts shuddered as their spinal-mounted railguns discharged. There were no bright flashes of laser fire, no elegant streaks of plasma. There was only the violent, invisible recoil of magnetic propulsion. The Council delegates watched the telemetry in confusion. Their sensors, calibrated for energy signatures, registered almost nothing. "What are they doing?" A Krell admiral squawked in the council chamber. "They are firing dead mass. The swarm's shields will simply repel it." But the council did not understand the sheer, terrifying arithmetic of human ballistics. The Raytheon-designed railguns weren't firing standard munitions. They were accelerating 2-ton slugs of depleted uranium, encased in tungsten, to a fractional percentage of the speed of light. At relativistic speeds, the kinetic energy of a macroscopic projectile transitions from mere force to a cataclysmic event. The astrophysics of the strike were governed by the principles of relativistic kinetic energy, where the destruction was dictated by K equals 1 over the square root of 1 minus V squared over C squared minus 1 mc squared. When a projectile carrying that magnitude of kinetic energy struck an energy shield designed to dissipate heat and plasma, the shield didn't repel it. The shield shattered. The silent void of space suddenly erupted into a graveyard of shattered geometry. The first volley hit the swarm with the force of continuous, localized nuclear detonations. Thousands of the tetrahedral entities simply ceased to exist, their energy-absorbing fields overwhelmed by the sheer, unadulterated brute force of kinetic impact. Tungsten slugs punched through their armor, continuing their trajectory to rip through 3, sometimes 4 entities in a single line before losing momentum. On the council feed, the Krell admiral fell silent. Xylar's bioluminescence dimmed in absolute shock. They were watching the apex predator of the galaxy being torn apart by the equivalent of highly accelerated musket fire. "Direct hits across the vanguard," Miller shouted over the cheers erupting on the bridge. "Swarm formation is breaking. They are taking catastrophic losses." "Don't get cocky, Captain," Brooks snapped, his eyes narrowing at the tactical display. "A predator doesn't survive this long without knowing how to adapt, reload the accelerators, maintain suppressive fire." But the swarm was already reacting. The surviving entities stopped their forward momentum. Instead of pressing the attack, they began to converge. Millions of tetrahedral ships snapped together like magnetic puzzle pieces, their dark energy fields overlapping, fusing, and compounding. "General," Dr. Cedric Pendleton's voice crackled over the secure comms channel from his bunker at JPL. "We have a severe escalation. The swarm isn't just a fleet, it's a decentralized megastructure. They are fusing. Their localized gravity is spiking off the charts." Before the human fleet could fire their second volley, the swarm had formed a colossal, singular structure, a spearhead of absolute blackness roughly the size of Earth's moon. The gravity well it generated was immense, warping the space around it. "Incoming!" Miller yelled. The swarm spear didn't fire a weapon, it simply pulsed. A wave of gravimetric distortion slammed into the First Fleet. 3 human dreadnoughts, the UNS Churchill, the UNS Patton, and the UNS Zhukov, were caught in the ripple. Their titanium alloy hulls groaned, then collapsed inward like crushed soda cans, killing thousands of sailors in an instant. "They're generating a localized singularity," Pendleton yelled over the comms, frantically typing. "General, kinetic weapons are useless now. That gravity well will catch your railgun slugs and tear them apart before they even scratch the hull. You have to pull the fleet back." Brooks slammed his fist onto the console. The swarm spear began to accelerate again, moving steadily toward the inner planets. It was preparing to swallow the sun. "Ambassador Whitmore," Xylar's voice echoed through the bridge, laced with despair. "You see now. You wounded it, but it cannot be stopped. Flee. Save your species." Whitmore, standing quietly behind Brooks, stepped forward into the glow of the holotable. He didn't look at the council feed. He looked directly at the general. "David," Whitmore said softly, "it's time to show them what the anvil can do." Brooks nodded slowly. "Miller, signal the Aegis ring. Initiate the Oppenheimer Protocol." The Aegis ring was humanity's most closely guarded secret. While the dreadnoughts were the sword, the massive, unfinished Dyson structure ringing the sun was the hammer. Built in a joint venture between SpaceX Engineering and DARPA's most classified Black Ops division, the ring was never meant to capture solar energy for civilian power grids. It was a directional funnel. "Oppenheimer Protocol acknowledged," the commander of the Aegis ring responded. Massive mechanical shutters, each the size of a small continent, began to open along the inner edge of the ring, exposing the raw, churning plasma of the sun. At the center of the ring's primary firing chamber sat a containment vessel holding a stabilized core of antimatter, the largest ever synthesized, harvested from the stripped remnants of Jupiter's moons. "The gravity well of that Leviathan structure is immense," Pendleton analyzed rapidly, feeding data to the ring's targeting computers. "If we hit it with a raw energy beam, the singularity will scatter it. We need to overload its mass limit. We have to combine the antimatter payload with a focused coronal mass ejection. The weapon's total yield would be a horrifying combination of pure solar fury and annihilation energy, governed by the precise release sequence calculated by JPL. E total equals integral from 0 to tau of P solar of TT plus 2 MAMC squared minus E grav. "Targeting solutions locked," Miller announced, his hands flying across his terminal. "The Leviathan is crossing the asteroid belt. It's entering the kill zone. Divert all auxiliary power to the containment field," Brooks ordered. "If this backfires, we fry our own planet." On the council feed, the alien delegates watched the telemetry from the sun. The energy spike was so massive it blinded their remote sensors for a fraction of a second. The primitive humans weren't just fighting the swarm. They were weaponizing their own star. "General, the swarm spear is detecting the energy buildup. They are altering course." "Too late," Brooks growled. "Fire the anvil." Deep within the Aegis ring, magnetic containment fields dropped. The antimatter core was violently pushed into the focused stream of solar plasma. The resulting reaction was channeled through the ring's electromagnetic barrel. Space itself seemed to scream. A beam of pure, blinding white light, a column of destruction 500 miles wide, erupted from the solar system's core. It crossed the distance to the asteroid belt in seconds. The beam struck the swarm spear dead center. For a terrifying moment, the localized singularity held, bending the light, trying desperately to consume the apocalyptic energy. But humanity had thrown the weight of a sun and the fury of antimatter at it. The mathematical limit of the swarm's gravity well shattered. The explosion did not make a sound in the vacuum of space, but the shockwave of displaced dark matter triggered sensor alarms across the entire galaxy. The swarm spear detonated from the inside out. Billions of tetrahedral entities were instantly vaporized. The shockwave fractured the remaining entities, snapping their hive mind connection. The once unstoppable swarm dissolved into dead, drifting debris. The stars were safe. Silence descended on the bridge of the UNS Washington. The tactical map, moments ago a sea of hostile crimson, was now empty, save for the blue markers of the human fleet. Brooks let out a slow, shaking breath. He looked down at his trembling hands, then up at the view screen. "Stand down the fleet. Begin search and rescue for the Churchill, Patton, and Zhukov." Ambassador Whitmore turned slowly to face the Galactic Council feed. The chamber on Primea was in utter pandemonium, delegates shouting, weeping, and staring in absolute, terrified awe at the telemetry data. They had just watched a species they considered barely sentient butcher an ancient god of the void. High Counselor Xylar stepped to the center of the chamber, his bioluminescence pale white. He looked at Whitmore, no longer a superior looking down on a primitive, but as a survivor looking up at a savior. "Ambassador Whitmore," Xylar's voice cracked. "The Council. The galaxy owes Earth a debt that cannot be repaid. The swarm is gone." Whitmore straightened his suit jacket. His face held no triumph, only the weary, hard-won grit of human survival. "You laughed at us, Counselor," Whitmore said, his voice echoing coldly through the assembly. "You thought our paranoia was a weakness, but out here in the dark, paranoia keeps you alive. We built weapons that terrified us because we knew the universe held worse." Whitmore stepped closer to the camera, his eyes burning with quiet intensity. "Earth is reopening its borders, but we are no longer asking for a seat at your table. We are building our own. And if anything else decides to come creeping out of the dark," Whitmore offered a chilling, razor-thin smile, "let them come. We'll keep the lights on." He cut the feed. "The universe is full of monsters, but they made a fatal mistake. They forgot that humanity has spent its entire history learning how to kill monsters. If you loved this epic tale of human resilience, defiance, and cosmic firepower, smash that like button. Don't forget to share this story with your fellow sci-fi fans, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible HFY dramas. The galaxy is vast, and humanity is just getting started. What should we conquer next? Let me know in the comments.